Well, there were bills other than those dealing with the budget that came out of the 2012 Louisiana legislative session. For a look at some of those bills and how they will affect you, we now turn to This Week in Louisiana Agriculture's Avery Davidson, who is standing by with this week's in-studio guest. Avery?
Mike, many of the laws will be on the books before the end of this year that came out of this legislative session. Meanwhile, some people are just happy that this session is over. Joining me now is Louisiana Farm Bureau Federation Legislative Specialist Joe Mapes. And Joe, the budget was obviously the big issue to come out of this session.
That's true, and Avery, you're right. I am one of the people that's very glad this session is over. It was an 85-day regular session in which any law could be filed, amended, passed, or killed, as opposed to the fiscal session. One of the greatest issues that we had to deal with was the budget deficit, which affected the Ag Department as well as the LSU Ag Center. We were very pleased to work at Commissioner Strain's direction and help him work on some laws that have been on the books for a long time and do some house cleaning there, as well as help keep some funds in place like the boll weevil eradication fund. And we commend Commissioner Strain and his entire staff for their direction at this legislature. Chancellor Richardson and his staff did a fine job in working with us as well at the LSU Ag Center. And I think you all know we suffered a $3.4 million mid-year cut for the Ag Center, and we suffered another $1.5 during the session. But we were able to secure some additional funding during the session, so hopefully that's going to turn out for the best in the end.
Now, taking a look at some of the other bills, I know that there was one which went before the Ag Committee, the House Ag Committee, or rather the Senate Ag Committee, concerning rice research funding. There were a group of rice farmers out of Jeff Davis Parish who asked Blade Morrish to file a bill on their behalf. Tell me a little bit about how that came about and how that sort of played out in the legislature.
Right. There was some dissension among some rice producers in regard to the Rice Research and Promotion Board. Legislation was filed. That legislation did not move forward, so the board remains intact as it was prior to the legislation. The board is doing a great job. We commend them for it, and we look forward to working with them in the years to come to promote and protect the rice producing industry in Louisiana.
Now, I know the Louisiana Farm Bureau Federation came out with a position concerning legacy lawsuits. Tell me a little bit about that legislation and how that could impact agriculture as a whole.
Well, legacy was a very contentious issue. You had multiple groups on both sides. Farm Bureau, we've been involved on legacy lawsuit issues since 2001, 2002, again in 2006, which put the current Act 312, or the one we just amended, on the books. And so we really didn't want to be in the middle of that, but we wanted to make sure that farm families and the land that they own were protected if they ever needed to be cleaned up. And I guess the best thing I could say is we did get pulled into the debate about 6 weeks into the 12-week session. We were able to get language in the legislation that puts the Commissioner of Agriculture in the mix so that he is consulted on cases, and that opinion can be entered into court as evidence. So we're very pleased to have the Commissioner of Agriculture's hand in all of that. So in the end, it was very contentious, but it came out well.
Well, since you were there every day, I have to ask the question, what was the mood like this session, and were there any bills that sort of got by that a lot of people may not have heard about but will be important to them, especially in agriculture?
Well, it was a tough session. We entered coming into a massive education reform, something we haven't done here in Louisiana in a very long time, went straight into retirement reform, keeping in mind that as soon as we came out of both of those, we're looking at dealing with the budget deficit and how to fund it. There was some discussion on whether we should fund it this way or that way. In agriculture, we were a few years back asked to remove our grain farmers from the Baton Rouge Port Commission because of an ethics opinion. So we went to try and address that with a port expansion board in the mix. In the middle of the session, we decided to take a different direction and pursue some ethics legislation, which now allows grain farmers to serve on the Baton Rouge Port Commission, as they do in New Orleans and have for decades, and also have themselves or an immediate family member sell grain to the elevator that's managed by the port.
Well, who would know more about dealing with port issues than someone who goes there on a regular basis?
Right, exactly. And 95% of the port's business is unrelated to grain. So 5% of it, at least they'll have that expert witness there to participate.
Well, Joe, we appreciate all that you do for us when you go there to the legislature. He is Joe Mapes, the Louisiana Farm Bureau Federation Legislative Specialist. So, Mike, that's sort of the lowdown on what happened this legislative session. Of course, come next year, it will be a fiscal-only session, but it still will be interesting. Back to you.
Avery Davidson, thanks.